Karoline Leavitt stared at the glowing screen, her hands trembling as she read the email for the third time. It was all there. Every detail, every connection. Her heart raced as she scanned the encrypted message that had appeared in her inbox late last night. Her first instinct was to delete it, to pretend it never existed, but something deep inside told her to look closer. There was too much at stake, too many powerful figures involved. And if it was true, it could shatter everything. She leaned back in her chair, eyes darting to the window. The soft glow of the morning sun barely pierced through the blinds, but the weight of what she was holding in her hands was heavier than any of the darkness she had endured. Her phone buzzed, snapping her back to reality. "Elon," she muttered under her breath, staring at the name on the screen. She had been waiting for this call, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure she was ready. She swiped to answer. The sound of static came first, followed by the familiar voice of the tech mogul. "You're sure about this?" Musk's voice was low, cautious, but with that unmistakable hint of confidence she had come to expect from him. But there was something else. Something she couldn't quite place. He was holding back. "I'm sure," Karoline replied, her voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside her. "It's all in the email. The money trails, the deals, the way everything connects. You need to see it for yourself." There was a long pause on the other end. Karoline could hear the faint sound of Musk's footsteps on concrete, as though he were pacing. "You're asking for a lot, Karoline. You know this could blow up in all our faces, right?" he said, his tone sharp. But there was an edge of uncertainty. "I know the risks," Karoline said, her jaw clenched. "But if we don't do something, it's going to be worse. This is bigger than either of us. It's bigger than Biden. This is the kind of thing they'll bury if we don't act now." She could hear the hesitation in Musk's breath. He was processing, weighing the pros and cons, and Karoline could feel the pressure mounting on both of them. The higher the stakes, the deeper the danger. "I can't be part of a smear campaign, Karoline. I'm not doing this to bring down a president just because we disagree with his politics. There's got to be more than just corruption in the air. What's your endgame here?" Karoline's eyes narrowed as she stared out at the skyline. She had no clear answer, no neatly wrapped-up plan. But she knew one thing for sure. This was her chance to fight for the truth. The whole truth. "We expose the corruption, Elon, and we let the people decide. We bring the proof to light, undeniable, irrefutable proof, and let the world see what's been happening behind closed doors. This isn't about politics. This is about justice." She could hear Musk exhale slowly on the other end of the line, as if he were letting the words settle into his mind. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke again. "Fine, send me the files. But if this goes south, if any of us get burned, you and I will be the ones paying the price. You understand that?" "I understand," Karoline said, her voice resolute. "I'll send it now, but be prepared. This won't be easy." Before he could respond, she hung up. Her heart pounded in her chest as she hit send on the encrypted email. The decision had been made. There was no going back. As the email whisked through cyberspace to Musk's inbox, Karoline stood up, her legs stiff as she walked to the window. She hadn't expected to find herself here, in this position, on the edge of something so volatile. But she had never been afraid of the unknown, never backed down from a challenge. And this was a challenge unlike any other. Musk's response came quickly. She checked her phone. "Got it. I'll look into this. I'll let you know." Her stomach churned with anticipation. She had done what she had to do, but now, all she could do was wait. Later that evening, her phone rang again, the name Elon Musk flashing across the screen. "This is bigger than we thought," Musk's voice came through, urgent and sharp. "We've got connections to the highest levels of government. Biden's people are involved in some serious backdoor dealings. We're talking tens of millions funneled into hidden accounts. It's all there." Karoline's pulse quickened, and her breath hitched. She felt a thrill run through her veins, but it was mixed with a deep sense of foreboding. The truth was out, and it was uglier than she had imagined. "We can't sit on this, Karoline," Musk continued, his voice steady but cold. "The evidence is real, and the people behind it? Powerful, dangerous. We need to be careful how we handle this." "I know," Karoline replied, her voice thick with emotion. "But we can't let them get away with it. We have to show the world. The people need to know what's been done in their name." "Are you prepared for the consequences?" Musk asked, almost as if he were testing her. "I've already made my peace," Karoline said, her voice firm. "We do this together, no turning back." There was a brief silence, and then Musk spoke again. "All right, let's do this." And with that, Karoline knew the storm was coming. The world would soon know the truth, and everything, Everything would change. As the night wore on, Karoline couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with what was to come. She thought about the people who would be impacted by their actions. The media, the public, the political elite. She thought about the threats she would face, the personal cost of taking on something so monumental. But she also thought about the people who had no voice, the ones who had been taken advantage of for years by the very system that was supposed to protect them. This wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about exposing the lies that had kept people in the dark. And Karoline wasn't afraid. She had made the choice, and now there was no turning back. The phone buzzed again, another encrypted message from Musk. She read it quickly. The files are secure, ready for the next step. Her hands shook slightly as she typed her response. Let's do it. Let's bring the truth to light. With each passing hour, the gravity of their actions settled in. Karoline knew the risks, but she had a mission, and it was one that was bigger than any one person. The world would know the truth soon enough, and Karoline was ready to face whatever came next. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from an anonymous source. They're watching. Be careful. Her breath caught in her throat. She had expected the threats, but seeing the warning, knowing that she was truly being watched, sent a chill down her spine. The game had changed. It was no longer about just exposing corruption. It was about survival. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Musk. I'll keep pushing. Stay safe. She didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The pieces were in motion, and the world was about to find out what had been hidden in the shadows for so long. And when the storm finally hit, there would be no shelter from the truth. The next morning, Karoline sat at her desk, staring at her laptop. The quiet hum of her apartment seemed to mock her as she sifted through the latest developments. It was getting harder to keep up with the story. Every new piece of information led to another, and every lead seemed to take her down a darker path. She knew she couldn't stop now, but the weight of the situation was beginning to sink in. Her phone buzzed again. It was Elon. Karoline. Musk's voice was tight, clipped. I've had my people go through everything. This isn't just corruption at the top. It's deep. And it goes further than just Biden. We're talking about entire systems, political networks, financial corruption, international deals. This is the kind of thing that could topple governments. She stared at the screen, her fingers trembling. This wasn't just about exposing a president anymore. This was about unraveling a global conspiracy. So what now? Karoline asked, trying to mask the growing fear in her voice. We go public, Musk said. But we need to make sure we have all the proof, the full story. If we're going to make a real impact, we need the evidence to be undeniable. And we need to be careful. They'll come after us. Karoline felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean, they'll come after us? Think about it. People like Biden have too much to lose. He won't go down without a fight, and neither will his allies. We're playing with fire here, Karoline, Musk warned, his tone low, serious. I'm not backing down, she said firmly, even though she could feel the fear creeping in. She wasn't backing down. Not now, not after everything she had seen. We do it on my terms, then, Musk replied. We'll drop the bomb, but we'll do it smart. We'll leak just enough to get them rattled, then wait. If they don't act, we push harder. But we need to be prepared. If things go sideways, we vanish. No one can know who we are. The next few days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and frantic work. Karoline dug deeper into the files Musk had sent her, cross-referencing them with her own sources. Each discovery sent a wave of unease through her. The scope of the corruption was staggering. Biden's administration wasn't just guilty of one or two shady deals. It was a network, a complex web of power, money, and influence that spanned continents. The more Karoline uncovered, the clearer it became. The story would change everything. It wasn't just a scandal, it was a revolution waiting to happen. But as she prepared to release the first batch of information, the risks became undeniable. The consequences of what they were about to do were impossible to ignore. Her phone rang again. She didn't even need to check the caller ID. Elon, she answered, trying to mask the exhaustion in her voice. What now? We need to meet, Musk said. This is escalating faster than I thought. We're not just dealing with political insiders anymore. There's someone else in play. Someone powerful. They're going to come for us, Karoline. Who? Karoline's stomach dropped. I don't know yet, but we've crossed a line. I can feel it. We need to move quickly, Musk replied. I'll make arrangements. We'll meet in a secure location. The sense of danger was palpable now, like a weight pressing down on her chest. But Karoline didn't hesitate. This was bigger than her. She couldn't stop, not when the truth was so close to being exposed. As the days dragged on, Karoline became increasingly aware of the shifting dynamics around her. The people she once trusted began to look at her differently. Her colleagues, her friends, even her family. She could see the suspicion in their eyes. They didn't know what she was working on, but they knew something was wrong. She could feel the walls closing in. And then, just as she had begun to think she might be able to get a handle on things, the first wave of backlash hit. The news broke in the early hours of the morning. Karoline Leavitt, the up-and-coming political figure, had become embroiled in a smear campaign against President Biden. The reports were vague, but they were damaging. They painted her as a partisan hack, a puppet of Musk, trying to undermine the integrity of the political system. Karoline slammed her fist against the desk in frustration. She had expected this, but it didn't make it hurt any less. She had expected the media to twist the narrative, but seeing it happen in real time made it feel like a punch to the gut. Her phone buzzed again. It was Musk. "I told you they'd come after you," Musk said, his voice grim. "They're going to try to destroy your reputation. But don't let it stop you. This is bigger than any of them." Karoline knew he was right. She had known this wouldn't be easy. But now that it had started, there was no turning back. She couldn't let them silence her, not when the truth was so close to breaking free. The attacks only grew stronger over the following weeks. Every article, every tweet, every comment from a talking head on TV painted Karoline as a liar, a troublemaker, a threat to democracy. The media storm became impossible to ignore. And then, something worse happened. Her phone rang in the middle of the night. It was a blocked number. "Karoline," a voice whispered, barely audible through the static. "You're not safe. They're coming for you. Get out now." The line went dead before she could respond. Her hands shook as she placed the phone down. Her heart pounded in her chest. The voice on the other end of the line had sounded like a warning, an urgent, dangerous warning. She wasn't just in the fight of her life. Now she was a target. By the time Karoline met Musk in person, the situation had spiraled far beyond her control. The once cautious plan to expose the corruption had taken on a life of its own, and now the stakes were higher than ever. They met in a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city, a location so secure that even Musk had to use a series of encrypted messages and codes to get inside. The air in the room was thick with tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Musk sat across from her, his face unreadable. "You weren't kidding," he said, rubbing his temples. "This is bigger than I thought. The people behind this, whoever they are pulling strings I don't even understand, and they're making their move, fast." Karoline didn't respond. She didn't need to. She knew exactly what he meant. The threats had become more direct. The media smear campaigns weren't just about reputation anymore. They were a cover-up, an attempt to shut them down before they could get too far. "We need to go public now," Karoline said, her voice resolute. "We can't wait any longer. The truth needs to come out." Musk hesitated, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. "What if they're already ahead of us? What if they've already neutralized our allies? We don't have any more time to waste," she shot back. "If we wait any longer, this will all be buried and will be forgotten." Musk leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. "Fine, but we're doing this on our terms. No more playing by their rules." Karoline nodded. She understood the gravity of what Musk was saying. If they were going to do this, they had to make sure the world heard them. And that meant playing their own game, one that was far more dangerous than anything either of them had ever experienced. The next few days were a blur of strategic planning, late-night phone calls, and encrypted messages. Karoline knew she was putting everything on the line, but she couldn't stop now, not when she was so close. When the time finally came to release the first batch of evidence to the public, Karoline felt a cold knot of fear settle in her stomach. This was the moment. The world would finally know the truth. But as she prepared to hit send, her phone buzzed once more. A new message from Musk. "Be ready, they're watching." The morning after they released the first batch of evidence, the world seemed to hold its breath. News outlets erupted with sensational headlines. Some were skeptical, questioning the authenticity of the documents, while others couldn't deny the growing evidence. But the public was divided. Some cried foul, others demanded answers. The storm had begun. Karoline was awake early, pacing her apartment as she refreshed her newsfeed. The first reports were already out, but they didn't have all the pieces yet. The backlash had been swift. Media pundits were already calling it a political vendetta, a smear campaign orchestrated by Musk and his allies. The president's supporters were out in full force, defending him and attempting to discredit the allegations. The political world was in chaos. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. It was Elon again. "We've made a mistake." His voice was low, tense. "The backlash is already growing. We need to control the narrative. They're twisting everything we've put out there." Karoline took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The pressure was mounting, and she could feel it bearing down on her chest. "I know," she replied, her voice shaking slightly, though she tried to keep it steady. "But we can't back down now, Elon. We have to see this through. The truth's out there, and if we pull back now, everything will be buried. Again." "I'm not saying we pull back," Musk said quickly, his voice sharp with frustration. "But we need to be smarter. If we're going to get to the heart of this, we can't just release everything at once. We need to be calculated. We have to make them sweat, make them panic." Karoline stared at the phone, gripping it tightly in her hand. He was right. The clock was ticking. If they were going to bring down an entire system, they needed more than just evidence. They needed strategy. They had to push until the world couldn't ignore them anymore. "We need to release more. Something that'll push them into a corner. Something they can't deny." There was a long silence on the other end before Musk spoke again. "Fine, but be careful. This is no longer just about politics. If they come for us, they're not going to hesitate." Karoline knew what he meant. They had already crossed the point of no return. The line between exposing corruption and destroying lives was razor thin, and they were about to push it even further. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The political machine churned, shifting into overdrive. Karoline and Musk worked together in secret, piecing together the remaining evidence. The risk of getting caught was palpable, but they knew they had no choice. As they prepared for the next release, Karoline felt a sudden unease, as if the entire world was holding its breath along with her. There was a sense of finality in the air, as though the moment of truth had arrived. The storm that had started was reaching its peak, and they had to be ready for whatever came next. Elon had arranged for a secondary server to release the files through an untraceable channel, ensuring that even if their identities were compromised, the information would still make its way into the public sphere. At precisely midnight, they made their move. The files went live. The impact was immediate. The media exploded. Headlines blazed across screens, screaming about the explosive new revelations. But this time it was different. This time, the evidence was so overwhelming, so detailed that it was impossible to ignore. The proof was undeniable. No more accusations, no more claims of manipulation. It was all there for the world to see. And the world responded. Protests erupted in major cities. Political figures scrambled to issue statements. In a matter of hours, Biden's approval ratings plummeted, and his allies began to distance themselves from him. It was chaos. And at the center of it all was Karoline Leavitt and Elon Musk. It didn't take long for the retaliation to begin. Karoline's phone rang early the next morning, the voice on the other end sending a jolt of adrenaline through her body. "Elon, I think we've just started a political war," she said as she answered. "It's everywhere. They're not just attacking Biden anymore. They're coming after us. Me, you. They've already started digging into our pasts." "I know," Musk said, his voice strained. "I've had my people watch everything. They're going after us from every angle. The media's already turned on us, but they're not the real threat. The real danger is what's coming next." Karoline's heart raced. She knew Musk wasn't exaggerating. The political elite, those at the highest levels of power, would not take this lying down. They would do everything in their power to silence them. "Do we fight back?" Karoline asked, barely able to keep her voice steady. "We do," Musk replied firmly. "But we don't fight dirty. We stay ahead of the narrative. We push back, but we do it smart. We let the evidence speak for itself. They can't stop the truth." And that was when it hit her. Their fight wasn't just with the politicians, it was with the system itself. And that system wasn't going to go down without a fight. The days following the release of the second batch of evidence were a blur. Karoline barely slept, too consumed by the whirlwind of media coverage, political fallout, and growing threats. Her every move was scrutinized, her every word twisted. But she had no time to dwell on that. She knew what was at stake. They couldn't afford to falter now. Biden's administration was crumbling, and with it the entire political structure that had protected him for years. But the deeper they dug, the more dangerous things became. Powerful figures, some with ties to foreign governments, others with vast financial empires, were pulling strings behind the scenes, doing everything they could to suppress the truth. They had to be stopped. Karoline met with Musk once more, this time in a remote location, far from the prying eyes of the media. "We're on the edge of something massive, Karoline," Musk said, his voice low and serious. "Once we take this final step, there's no turning back. You ready?" Karoline nodded, but her heart was heavy. She had come this far, and now, standing on the precipice of it all, she wasn't sure what awaited her on the other side. "We do this, and we expose everything," she said firmly. "Not just Biden, not just his people. The entire system. The corruption, everything." Musk's eyes narrowed. "Are you ready for what comes next? Because once we go public with this, there's no stopping it. The fight for power is going to get ugly." "We've already started it," Karoline said, her voice unwavering. "There's no turning back now. The truth is out. And no one, not even them, can stop it." The decision was made. The final bombshell was dropped, and the world would never be the same again. With the final release of information, the shockwaves rippled through the political world. The corruption went deeper than anyone had anticipated, involving not just Biden but other powerful figures who had been pulling the strings for years. The walls that had held up the corrupt system began to crumble. But in the aftermath, Karoline and Musk knew that their fight was far from over. The political fallout would continue. The forces that had been exposed would not give up easily, and so, the battle for the truth raged on, as the world watched, waiting to see who would come out on top. But one thing was clear: Karoline Leavitt and Elon Musk had changed the game forever. The immediate aftermath of the final release of information sent shockwaves through every corner of the political and media world. Karoline and Musk watched as the landscape around them shifted, rapidly and violently. The pieces were moving in ways they hadn't anticipated, and the ripple effect of their actions began to touch everything, from the halls of government to the streets outside. Biden's resignation was only a matter of time, but the chaos didn't stop there. The political fallout was far-reaching. As Biden's allies began to distance themselves, desperate to salvage their own careers, Karoline felt the weight of everything she had done. The system she had tried to expose was now fighting back with everything it had, and it was clear they weren't just after her. They were coming after everyone who had a hand in bringing the truth to light. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Karoline asked, her voice breaking the silence that had hung between her and Musk for hours. Musk glanced at her, his face unreadable. "I think the right thing is always complicated," he said slowly. "But it's not about what we think anymore. It's about what happens next. And there are too many people who want to bury this. The truth is out, Karoline, but it's far from over." Despite the undeniable success of their mission, bringing down a powerful figure and exposing a network of corruption, Karoline couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her. She had wanted to tear down the system, but now that it was crumbling, she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came after. The media landscape was a battlefield. Every day, new stories emerged, some attacking Karoline's credibility, others claiming that the release of the evidence had destabilized the political order in dangerous ways. The mainstream media, once willing to accept the story, had turned against them, painting Karoline and Musk as villains. They were accused of creating chaos, of manipulating the political system for their own benefit. The media's narrative had shifted from one of investigative triumph to one of disaster. But the damage was already done. The truth could no longer be buried. The public, however, was more divided than ever. Protests raged across the nation, with people demanding accountability. Some rallied behind Karoline and Musk, celebrating them as heroes for exposing the corruption. Others were filled with outrage, calling for justice to be served on those who had dared to upset the political order. The streets became a battleground in the war for the future of the nation. As Karoline watched the storm unfold, she felt the overwhelming weight of the decision she had made. The battle for the truth was never going to be simple, but she hadn't expected it to be this vicious. It seemed as though the entire world was turning against her. The media, the political establishment, even the public, all seemed to be caught in a whirlwind of anger and confusion. But the biggest threat wasn't the media or the protesters. It was the shadowy figures behind the scenes who had been pulling the strings all along. They were maneuvering, preparing their counterattack. Karoline could feel it, like a heavy fog creeping over her, suffocating her every move. These were powerful people who wouldn't just let their empire crumble without a fight. "Elon, we can't keep going like this," Karoline said one evening, her voice trembling. "They're targeting us. Every move we make is being watched. I'm starting to think that exposing the truth was only the beginning." Musk's expression was cold, distant. He was always calculating, always one step ahead. But even he could feel the weight of the danger closing in. "I know," he said grimly. "They're coming for us, but we can't stop now. We've lit a fire that won't go out. If we back down, they'll win. They'll bury us and the truth forever." Karoline clenched her fists, staring out the window as the weight of his words settled in. The road ahead was murky, and the consequences were far from clear. The power of the system they had tried to bring down was immense, and it was clear that they were just beginning to scratch the surface. "We need to find out who's really behind this," she said, determination rising in her voice. "It's not just Biden. It's the people in the shadows, the ones pulling the strings. We can't stop until we expose everyone." Musk nodded slowly. "We go deeper, but be careful. We're in too deep already. One wrong move, and it could all come crashing down." The threat wasn't just about physical danger. It was about the power and control of a system that had been entrenched for decades. Karoline had no illusions anymore. The fight she had started was no longer about politics. It was about survival. They spent the next few days working furiously, digging into the dark underbelly of the system they had exposed. And in doing so, they uncovered even more dangerous truths. Corruption on an international scale, involving billions of dollars, foreign influence, and covert operations. They knew they couldn't reveal everything at once. It would be too much, too dangerous. But the pieces were falling into place. In the midst of all this, Karoline received another anonymous message. It was short, cryptic. "You've pissed off the wrong people. You won't survive this." She read the message again, the weight of it settling in. This wasn't a game anymore. She had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. By the time Biden finally resigned, the damage had already been done. His resignation marked the end of an era, but the aftermath was far more complicated than anyone had imagined. The political landscape had been irreparably altered. Karoline and Musk were hailed as heroes by some, but to others, they were villains. The lines between right and wrong had blurred. The truth had come out. But it wasn't the simple victory they had imagined. The nation was more divided than ever, and the chaos that had erupted in the wake of the scandal showed no sign of calming down. For Karoline, the victory felt hollow. She had brought the truth to light, but at what cost? The country was fractured, the system still intact, and the fight for justice was far from over. "We did it," Musk said one evening, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "But it's not over, Karoline. There's always going to be someone else pulling the strings." Karoline nodded, her eyes distant. She had always known that exposing one truth only led to the discovery of others. The battle for change was an ongoing process, one that couldn't be won with a single victory. It was a fight that required constant vigilance, and even then, victory was never guaranteed. "I don't know if I'm ready for what's next," Karoline admitted, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I thought exposing the corruption would fix things, but now I see, it's just the beginning." Musk leaned back, his gaze hardening. "The fight never ends. But you've started something that can't be undone. The truth is out, Karoline. It'll be up to the next generation to decide what to do with it." As the dust settled, the future of the country and of their struggle remained uncertain. Karoline had ignited a revolution, but it was one that came at a heavy price. The world was watching, waiting to see how the story would unfold. And though the corruption had been exposed, it was clear that the fight for justice would continue, long after the headlines faded. The question now was not whether the truth would survive, but whether the system would be able to adapt to the changes it had wrought. Karoline didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing: this was far from the end. And so the battle continued. Unseen, unheard, but always there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the next spark to ignite it.